All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Craig Monroe. I'm founder of Elegant Literature. I'm joined by Haley Milliman, who is the head of education for Pro Writing Aid, and of course Chris Spear, who is our winner for the Shadows and Knives contest with the story "Dispose of a Body with This Weird Trick." Chris, thank you for joining us, and congratulations on winning the $3,000 prize.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for picking my story. It was such a lovely surprise, and it's always obviously the hope that you do well with a story, that you get published. You get somewhere with it. But yeah, I didn't expect it for a second. And reading through this month's magazine as well, there's so many great stories in there, so many talented writers. So to be published alongside them is lovely. To win was crazy. So thank you so much for choosing my story.
Fantastic. So I'm going to be, I know Haley has some questions for you. I'm going to hand it over to her in just a moment. But in case anybody watching this hasn't read your story, first of all, pause the video, go do that. It's great. Read the whole magazine. It's free on the website. But if you want to just take 30 seconds to 1 minute and give us, a brief, in your own words, what your story was about.
Okay, yeah, sure. So it's essentially a parody. It's a parody of a clickbait listicle article that you'd find on a website. I liked the idea that these clickbait articles that you find online, that they're incredibly frustrating to read for a number of reasons, and they're so ripe for parody. And I liked the idea of taking something dark, like obviously this issue with Shadows and Knives. It's crime, it's murder, and taking that sort of serious subject matter and then planning that on this sort of ridiculous, preposterous sort of online article, and just sort of blending the two really. It's it's super silly, but it's also I'm hopefully saying something a little bit deeper about the sort of the sort of content that we engage with online. But it was a very fun thing to write. It's only short. It is sort of trying to map this sort of the article that you see. You see them everywhere online, and anytime you do a Google search or you're on a website and you see an advert for it. So yeah, that's the general thing that I was going for, and hopefully sort of get a few good laughs out of you, and then I'm happy with that.
Fantastic. And Haley, as our guest judge, I think I read her judge's comments and was roped in by that exact parodies. Haley, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for being our guest judge for the contest. It's fantastic to have you. And I know that you have some questions for Chris, and you got some comments about a story. So I'm going to hand it over to you to kind of lead our discussion here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, congratulations, Chris. And I definitely think that the two of the things that you just called out, I feel like you did such a wonderful job of achieving. The first is you truly made me laugh out loud. Like I read the story and laughed out loud several times. And then I really thought you did an excellent job at mimicking the structure of these kind of listicle articles that we all find online. And then also saying something about it. I think it was the kind of dichotomy between the absurdity of what was being said and also the fact that I could very easily see an article like that being published somewhere. I think you really did actually offer some commentary about the state of kind of what exists in the world in online content in some ways. As somebody who kind of works in content marketing, so sometimes some of the decisions around what's published is truly like what will get clicks, and you could see a hapless SEO manager out there being like, oh, there's a lot of keyword searches for how to get rid of a body. We better cover this with a listicle. So yeah, it deeply resonated, and which is maybe troubling, but I really loved it. So I'm really always very interested. I work a lot with writers, and I'm always really interested in kind of craft and how you approach structuring your story. So I'd love to hear a bit about that. Clearly you were trying to follow the listicle format, but in terms of process, where did you start from the idea?
Yeah, so this one was interesting because obviously most of the stories that I write, I tend to write sort of more speculative fiction, and I rarely do research. It's more that I get an idea and then I sort of map it out or whatever. With this, it was clearly I had the idea, early on about just the idea of what if I wrote sort of a clickbait type article about something like a murder. That would be funny if I could get it right. And then I did research. That's not something I normally do, because especially for short stories, especially speculative fiction, it's not something you really get a lot out of. But this was very much going online, having a look for a couple of hours and just finding out just looking for stuff, these articles and see.
Giving yourself permission to give into that clickbait.
Yeah, exactly. Like normally it's like, oh, don't click that. That's not going to be worth its time, is it? And, oh, that's it. Oh, because it's always the thing when you click on these articles and you see the headline and go, oh, that sounds interesting. You click it and you never get the answer you're looking for. It's always annoying. It's like whether it's a recipe and then you're scrolling forever and then it's always the headline's always a bit of a lie or something. So yeah, my web search history was probably a bit balked after that for just sort of searching for all these terrible websites for a couple of hours looking for all these things. But yeah, I mapped through them all, and there was obviously definitely things that I found that were sort of apparent in a lot of them. So there was definitely sort of things that I'd see where I sort of broke it down into sort of three things. The first one was that they always started waffling, and it was always a couple paragraphs where you had to just read to get through, and there was no information there, and it's just sort of repetitive and just sort of saying the same things over and over again. It's because obviously that's where you land on the page, but they want you to scroll, they want you to go past more ads, they want you to keep you on the page longer, so you're scrolling. So I had to try and sort of start off with a couple paragraphs where it was trying to make some jokes but also make it sound like it's just going around in circles, you're not getting any information. Then the second bit that I found was with a lot of these stories was they tried to grab you in by sort of making them relatable. So they'd say they'd always obviously I made a joke about it in the story about it, insert local town here, because it was always wherever you lived, that's where it said that the person was, that discovered the idea or whatever the story was about. It was always somewhere local. So I had to sort of grab sort of, a real person that was just, apparently an ordinary person that discovered something. And that was always, something that came up in a lot of these. So that was there in the middle. And then the ending was always a disappointment. You scroll through this article, all these ads, all these pop-ups, and you go in there forever trying to find the information that you saw in the headline. Go, well, come on, just tell me now. And then you get there, and it'd always be a disappointment. You'd never learn anything. Never, or you'd go there and go, oh, this incredible trick's going to be something, and then it's just disappointment. And every one of these articles, you sort of go, why did I bother? Like they tricked me. I got down to the bottom and said, yeah, that's again, I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have clicked it. It was clickbait. It's
not baking soda. It's acid.
That's it. Yeah, of course. Like the one weird trick. Oh, it's baking soda. No, it's not. It's like when you see oh, this cupcake recipe takes just 2 minutes, and then you look at it and it cooks in 2 minutes, but it's an hour of prep, and you're like, well, that's not 2 minute cupcakes.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just whatever it happens to be, whatever it's about, it's always whether it's a recipe, whether it's a how-to article, whether it's sort of something trying to sell you something, saying if you just do that, you can make loads of money, and it's always a lie. It's always you reach the end and go, why did I bother?
Yeah, I saw actually a tweet maybe yesterday that was talking. There's been like a blackout on Reddit, a user-generated blackout on Reddit in the last couple of days because of some of their changing policies around third-party apps. And the tweet was basically saying that they realized how messed up Google's search algorithm is because they always search for like Reddit, how to dispose of a body or something like that, because the useful content is on Reddit versus on Reddit, Google, because these articles, just like you're saying, are actually just like a bunch of kind of waffle and nonsense, and then maybe a pitch to something else at the end. So yeah, that resonates with me. And I love that you just kind of like included the typical just links to other articles that might be tangentially related to this thing, where it's just always kind of an unsatisfactory experience.
And you nailed those hooks too, like the related articles. I was like, I was just reading it on a page, and I was like, I want to click on that. I know it's just a start.
Yeah.
Like, I want to find out what she looks like after 10 years of prison.
Exactly.
But yeah, it was the idea of sort of putting in these headlines that would sound like the other sort of headlines you'd see on a website, but also try and give you that feel of, I couldn't put adverts in, I couldn't get pictures and annoying pop-ups, but I could at least put these headlines that broke it up that you'd have to, here's another thing that you have to scroll past to sort of get through. Yeah. So, I'm glad those resonated.
Yeah, definitely. And so is structure something you play with in your kind of typical speculative fiction writing, or are you typically following something that's more like a traditional 3-act structure or something like that when you're writing?
I'd probably say I do a bit of both. Sometimes it's nice if it depends on the idea. I think you get an idea and you go, that in your head is just, you go, okay, that's a really good traditional story. I can, when you get the idea, you start thinking about it and you go, okay, there's the first, second, third act, and that's, pretty down the line. Other times, if you get an idea and go, I don't know if I can do that much with it, and then you'll look for an angle and try and find a way of, okay, maybe if I change the structure around, maybe I tell it a different way, then you can do something with it. I think of the most of the short stories that I've written in the last sort of 6 months or so, I feel like I've probably wrote more traditional stories, but there's definitely a few in there where I've attempted to do something a little different. And I'm seeing it a lot more in fiction, like, recently, like, there's some modern books out there that do definitely play with the format, and it is always refreshing. I think, like, it's, in submitting to a short story compilation like Elegant, where you've got this magazine of all the different stories, it is always nice to have one or two where the structure is that little bit different, and it's just that nice change of pace. So it was definitely a thing where if I can come up with a fun angle that I think, okay, this is a bit different than your traditional story, then it's worth submitting, it's worth working on, because they're fun to write. They're more of a challenge. Definitely, like, this one I had to research and stuff. Like, it was definitely, I had to put more effort in that sense. But it's definitely fun to write. I really enjoyed writing this. It was
fun to read, as especially in, like, I think you mentioned this earlier, in Shadows and Knives, that theme for the contest and the magazine submissions. I read a lot of death and a lot of murder, and people trying to go dark, trying to go gritty, and a lot of them worked. But when you have one that is kind of straight comedy, basically, a little bit of satire, it stands out from all of the other ones, and then even with the formatting too, kind of adds another layer of standout. So it got my attention. It got Haley's attention.
Yeah. It definitely stood out, I think, from the pack just right away. And I will actually say, because I work with content writers a lot, one of the things that I tell people who are writing for web is to really get their formatting down so that it is an easy on the eyes read, as well as just kind of being, typically, like, you use easy language for a wide audience. So you actually got you nailed the formatting as well, because it's, typically short paragraphs, easily broken up with kind of visual elements as well. So I really appreciated that. Sorry, I think I cut you off.
No, it's fine. No, but I say, definitely sort of, I'd recommend, like, playing with structure every now and then if you are especially writing short stories, so you can really play in, do it. And if it doesn't work, it's fine. You just move on to the next one. You don't have to spend ages on a short story like you would like a novel or something. And I think the other story that I had published by Elegant was diary entry. So even that was, it wasn't your straightforward third person narrative. It was something a bit different. It was first person. It was, split into sort of thing. So I definitely like it when I can do it. And clearly it's worked for me when I have done it and managed to do it well. So I think that's the thing with playing with structure. It either works or it doesn't. If it works, fantastic. People are going to enjoy it. If it doesn't, it just sort of crashes and burns, and you just have to sort of push it to one side and go, well, I attempted it, it didn't work, it's fine, I'll move on. Whereas, traditional narrative, it's a much harder to tell because I finished this and thought, I really like this. This is great. I have no idea if anyone else will like it, but I think it's, it's funny. I think I've done well here. But, you never know. Whereas, I've written some sort of more, stricter narrative stories where you finish it and go, I think that's good, but it's so much harder to tell. Whereas if it's like, I thought that I'd got the structure right. It felt like I'd at least got that bit right, even if the jokes weren't funny. I'd at least done the structure correctly, and that helped. So it's definitely a fun thing to do, playing with the structure.
I'm curious if the drafting process was any faster. It sounds like the research and kind of the structure piece took a while to get that set and to get that how you wanted it to be. But in terms of actually writing the piece, did you find that there was any difference between this draft and, typical kind of short story drafts that you've done and other styles?
A little bit, but not that much. Obviously, because it was shorter. Like a lot of the stories, I tend to go over long. So obviously, for Elegant, if I'm submitting, it's around the 2K mark, and a lot of other magazines are roughly the same. So I'm normally aiming for about that. With this, I knew it was going to be shorter. So obviously, just the amount of time that I spent on, say, I think I wrote the first draft in one go, because again, 600 words, and there was pauses to think of. But I wrote it, and then if I get to a point where I needed a joke but didn't know what to write, I just skip past it, and then I knew I'd come back to that later. And so I could just do that first draft in one, I think maybe 2-3 hour sitting. Whereas, other stories, if I'm writing 2K words, it might then be, across a bit of a longer stretch. And then same with editing, I think. I had certain gaps, and I remember definitely there was a good hour where I just sat there just going, right, I need a joke here, sit and think of something. Okay, I'm happy with that, or that's a good placeholder. I'll maybe see if I come back to it and think of something better or whatever. But it was. I think it was pretty much just like an evening of research, and then an evening first draft, and then probably a couple of evenings of editing, and sort of trying to get all the jokes as good as I possibly could. So I'd say with the traditional stories, I'd definitely spend longer on the first draft and probably the editing, just because I'm going through it line by line, and something that this short was obviously just faster, just by the nature of it. There was obviously the prep time, like you said, but other than that, it definitely was a shorter writing process, this one.
Did you conceive of character at all in this drafting process? Because in some ways there is no real character, but you can also think of the kind of site itself. as a character.
Yeah,
So I'm just curious if you thought about character at all with this.
it is funny because it's definitely a thing where the last few years when I've been really, doing my best to read as much as I can, really learn how to write good narratives. Everything that I've read really says, character first, character.
Yeah.
That's what you focus on. And it's true. Like when I write, if I write a short story and it's very character driven, and you can really sort of feel the character coming off the page, it works so much better. And if I have a weaker character, it just doesn't land. This was that sort of weird exception where I went into it knowing that it's a parody. I can't really do much character stuff in this. Obviously, there are people in it, but they're caricatures. And not the whole point is that they're not real people. They're just this sort of framework to hang this clickbait on. So yeah, it is kind of funny that obviously this story was successful and you've enjoyed it when it sort of goes against a lot of the things I've learned, but obviously it is very much a different case. It isn't that sort of normal narrative prose. It is something very specific. It's say I do love focusing on character, and if I get the character right, it makes me happy. And this one it did feel weird not to have anything in there. And but there was, I say, after doing the research I did, I was like, there's no real way you could fit it into a story like this, I don't think, and it wouldn't feel right. That what I could have done, because I remember my initial idea when I had for the story was, I can't remember what, I think I was probably looking at a recipe because I do a fair amount of cooking.
Yeah.
And quite often I'll go on a recipe and I'm just there, just scrolling through and just getting frustrated. And God's like, thank God this isn't important, because if it was important, this is taking too long. And then I just had this picture of someone with a body in front of them, and the police are knocking on the door, and they're like, "Come on, give me the," and just like scrolling through it. And that was like that sort of funny, like initial idea I had. I was like, oh, that would be, that would make a fun story. But it's difficult because like I could have put a framing device around it and had that sort of someone literally needs to learn and then they're looking it up and stuff, but I think it would have taken it away if you had this sort of narrative bit at the start and at the end of it wouldn't have felt so punchy. I don't think it would have worked quite as well. So even though it would have had that more character thing and got you in there with a real sort of real character, so to speak, I feel like it probably does work better as this short quick sort of thing where it's just the article and nothing else, and you can sort of take it, laugh, and then go. I hope anyway.
Yeah, and I think the form is so ubiquitous to most of us who use computers or phones in any way that you can insert yourself as a character. You can kind of overlay that already. You can kind of see the application of how an article like this would form. So you don't need the kind of context setting you were talking about it's funny just in itself because of the ubiquity of the concept, if that makes sense.
I would say that it's funny because obviously when I won the contest, I obviously told my friends and family, and my parents said, "Oh, what's the story? Like, what's it about? Like, can we read it?" But they're very much not online. They're older generation. They don't use computers and stuff. So they haven't actually read it yet, and I'm fascinated to see what they think of it, because obviously it's very much a clear parody of something where if you know what it is, you know exactly what it's parodying. But if you've never been introduced to this sort of article before, I think they're going to probably scratch their heads and go, "What is this exactly?" Like, there's a few jokes in there that they can understand, and generally speaking, like I've said to them that it's a parody article, so I think they'll get they're smart enough, they'll get the idea. But I think it would definitely hit differently if you weren't aware of these. Whereas, say, anyone basically that's online is going to have come across an article like this at some point or another. But yeah, definitely that older generation, I imagine that it doesn't quite work the same if you don't know what it's talking about.
I'm curious, who was the first person you told you won the contest?
So I'm married, and I was sat with I had a long day at work, and then I've got a 3-year-old daughter, and she's currently in a phase where her 8 p.m. bedtime is now more of a suggestion than a rule. So we sort of fought to get her down that night, and I remember I knew that it was the day of the magazine launch. In the UK, it tends to be about 8-9 o'clock that the magazine launches, and I came down. My wife was like just behind me, and I grabbed my phone and saw the email from Craig, and I was like, "Oh, great, I'll have a look." And saw it on there, and then my wife came down as well, and I said, "Oh wow, it's been published." And she said, "Oh well, well done." And we were both just exhausted and just like not in the mood to just, okay. And then suddenly I noticed I'd won, and I sort of jumped up and was like, "Oh, I got first place." And she was like, "Okay," and she didn't really know what that meant. I was like, "First place is $3,000." She was like, "What?" Just flipped out, or just like, that was a bit of a surprise. It definitely cheered us up then. So she was in the room with me, but then after that it was just a few text messages to a few friends that know that I write, going, "Oh yeah, check this out," sort of thing. That was my wife is I wouldn't say she's not supportive, but at the same time, she doesn't really care. She's very much your writing's your thing. She doesn't read much anyway, and she's like, "That's not." But yeah, so when my writing stuff, if I get a win, like, "Oh, been published, or I've got, an honorable mention or something like that. It's just like, yeah, oh yeah, well done you. Yeah, it doesn't really care. Just
Yeah,
pretends to you. So, oh, what, you've won a lot of money. Suddenly now I'm interested. Like.
Oh, that's awesome. You were mentioning earlier that you had been doing a bunch of reading on kind of craft and writing style and technique. Are there any resources that you've come across in your studying that you've really found that have resonated with you?
Oh, good question. I'm trying to think of. I'm terrible at remembering, because the problem with there's a lot of great books out there, but the problem with a lot of them is that all the titles are very samey, and you try and I think I think this is one of the earlier ones that I read, and I remember always, and I do go back to it every now and then. I think it's called The Anatomy of Story by John Truby, and it was. I think it's more for screenwriting, but honestly, it works just as well as novels. And something I found fairly early on when you read a lot of these things is they'll give you a set of rules, and that's fine. But what you'll find as you write is, okay, basically you need to understand what the rules are, but then as you keep writing, you'll basically get to a point and go, well, I don't want to follow that rule, but I've got a reason for it. And as long as that's the case and you understand what you're doing and why you're breaking it, it works. So that John Truby one, it's got a load of good stuff in there. And if you're just getting started, I definitely recommend it. Like, it's a great book in terms of picking apart how, you say you mostly focus on films, but how stories work and stuff. But I'd say that it basically it's got some really key things in there that I was really attracted to, and I thought, oh, okay, that's such a great way of explaining something. So again, I've been learning loads, but then it didn't really apply it to this particular short story, because obviously this was something very specific. But just generally, like, it had a thing about where you've got, say, a protagonist and then an antagonist. Obviously, the antagonist is always pushing the protagonist, but what you should have is other related characters in the story should effectively work as antagonists, or pushing the protagonist in a different way. So essentially, your protagonist is always under pressure from multiple angles. So it's like, even if they've got, like, I've recently been working on a detective novel. So he's, the detective's got a partner. He's obviously an ally, but he's pushing her on certain things, and so she's getting sort of attacks from, even though they're friendly attacks, they're still getting attacks from that side. You're getting attacks from the antagonist. You're getting attacks from, if it's a detective novel, the captain of the precinct or whatever. So you're getting all these pressures. So yeah, I think little things like that in the book were really great. I'm trying to remember. I remember enjoying a lot. Stephen King's got a book. I think it's just called On Writing.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, sort of an essential one. I think. Yeah, I'm guessing most aspiring writers have read it at some point. But yeah, it's fascinating. Sort of just listening to someone who's that famous of an author just talking about the process, and it's just sort of refreshing to see, oh, okay, like some things, like the fact that he writes 2K words a day every day, including Christmas, literally just that's what that's like, oh god, like, I'm never going to be able to manage that. But there are other things where you go, oh, okay, like his process isn't that dissimilar to mine. He does, he's a writer, he does the same things, he's working, so he's definitely not less of a plotter. He just sort of sits down and starts writing. But even so, like, there was definitely things in there that it was good to read, and just sort of that sense of even really successful writers have a process that's the same as you. They do things roughly the same ways, even if they have certain differences here and there. I think there's
no right or wrong way.
No, exactly. Of course, there's going to be differences, and yes, a lot of these books, the ones that I like the least tend to be, do exactly this, and this is how you write a story. And it's like, no, that's not true. Like, there was one that I remember, it picked apart a lot of stories, and it had a lot of examples, but I remember it was looking at films, and it got to the end and it was going listing all these different ones, and then I don't know why the author even did it, because it made them look foolish, but they brought up No Country for Old Men, and they basically just said, Coen brothers are geniuses, I don't know how they did it, and just sort of wash their hands of it. It's like, right, so your structure works except for when it doesn't. And it's, if you've got like hardline rules, it seems silly, because you're always going to find examples that work brilliantly. I remember there was another book that sort of looked at Pulp Fiction, and they bent themselves over so backwards to try and fit that movie into their structure, and it's like, it doesn't fit at all. You try to make it fit, basically working from your structure backwards, but there are plenty of stories out there that you look at them and go, this shouldn't work, but it absolutely does. There is no right way, like you said.
There is no one overarching structure that every story fits into. It's like like I know of a half a dozen or more, at least more different structure styles, and some of them overlap, and you could apply 2 or 3 to any one story probably. But it doesn't mean that every story has to fit. Like, there's no one that work. So anybody that is trying to analyze other work to say this is why my story structure would work really well because everything is it, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's probably a trap that a lot of, again, if you only pick up one or two of these books, if you write a story and it fits the exact rules that they've set out and go, look, it fits the rules. It's just like some of my favorite stories. But it's like, just because you've done that, it doesn't mean that it's going to be a satisfying story. And obviously, a lot of these rules have been based on successful stories over the years, but people are now sick of a lot of these things appearing. You only have to look at certain, films or stories that are coming out. Like, I've been reading a lot of detective novels recently because that's what I've been working on. But so many of them are, the detective with a dark past. They're hiding a secret, or something bad happened to them. They're looking for their wife's murderer, or their child was abducted, and they're still looking for them. And it's very much like that is, it fits the template of, if you read a storytelling book, it will fit those rules. But after a while reading a few of them as a reader, you start to get bored, and then suddenly a book comes along that doesn't follow the rules, and you go, that's brilliant because it's something different. It still follows some of the rules. It still obviously, you can look at any writing book and go, oh, it does this and that, but it's cherry picked the ones it wanted to tell the story it was trying to tell, rather than just literally going, oh, this is the template, I can't differ from this, I've got to literally follow this from A to Z and with no distinction. I think it's great to read lots of these books to get an idea of, because I wrote my first book when I didn't know what I was doing, when I was just fresh out of university. I was in my early 20s, just thought, oh, I had an idea for a book. I like the idea of writing. I'll give it a go. And clearly, it's all over the place, and it was a mess, and it didn't end up well. Obviously, because I hadn't put the time in to at least pay attention to. You need to learn the basics of how to craft a story. But there's there's a difference between knowing nothing and breaking rules unintentionally because you don't know what the rules were and you don't really know what you're doing, as opposed to, okay, you've got this set of rules that some writers have said this is how a story looks, and then bending it in certain ways to surprise the audience intentionally or something like that.
Chris, you seem very knowledgeable about the writing and rules, and well read, and you can talk about it. I'm wondering, what's your experience, what's your background with writing? What's the very first time that you gave your hand at writing fiction? What made you want to?
So I've always loved stories. I remember even being, as a kid, being in English class when I was 5 or 6, and I was never I did fine at school, but I was never the kid that was. I was never going to end up studying literature at university or anything. I was never that way inclined. I never poetry. I never got on with. I never got on with what I consider real literature. And I like stories. That's why I just want something to be to sweep me up or whatever. I don't want sort of a Hemingway or something. I'm not. It's just not my type of thing. But I always loved storytelling. I remember being a young kid and just always, if we got to write in class, it was, I can write a story. I can just make things up, and it's fun. And I just love that sort of creative aspect of just being able to put together stories. I say, when I was fresh out of university, I had no idea what I wanted to do as a career. And I was working part-time at the time, and just thought, I've got time on my hands. I'm just going to write a book because I want to. I say it didn't go well because I didn't know what I was doing. But then sort of after that failure, sort of went, okay, I need to go get a real job. And that's what I did. I work as a data analyst now. It's completely, probably the least creative job you can think of, in terms of, it's just working with spreadsheets, and it's very, very dry. But it has meant that, because obviously I'm not using any sort of creative muscles at work, I've then in my free time, I want to write stories again. So yeah, I spent a good, I want to say at least sort of 4 or 5 years. I had the failure of the book. I'd assumed that I probably wasn't going to pick up writing again, or if I did, it would be really just as a hobby. But just spent a load of time going, well, picking apart what I did wrong and learning a lot about storytelling. And I do find it fascinating. I think if I'd started it earlier, I would have been a lot better off, because I do like reading, let's say, a lot of these storybooks, or just watching video, YouTube essays or whatever it is, just working about here's a story, what makes it work, what makes it doesn't work, and just sort of that analysis of it. So yeah, I spent a fair few years just sort of writing the odd bit here and there, maybe the odd short story, maybe a bit of some screenplays I wrote just for fun, just something, because I had an idea and I thought, it'll be fun to do. But yeah, so I spent, say, a few years just sort of knocking around doing that, and then I had my work had sort of settled down. I was in a bit of a rut, and I had this idea for several ideas for novels, but there was one that sort of floated to the surface, and it was just it's that sort of cliche of, I don't write because I want to, I write because I have to. And if I don't write for months, it really starts to annoy me, because I'll have an idea in my head and just get it down on paper. If I put it down on paper, it leaves my head then, and I can just I can leave it for a while, and I feel better. So yeah, I had an idea for a book, and I was just like, it's such a huge sort of devotion of time to write a novel, but I've just got to do it. It's frustrating me that I'm not, and I just thought, it's fine. It doesn't matter if it takes a long time. I'm just gonna I spent a long time learning how to do things, and then I spent a long time plotting it and outlining it and trying to get it, as good as I could. And got halfway through and then completely changed my mind and changed things anyway. But yeah, sort of spent about. I mean, I finished the first sort of. I would say the first draft, the draft that I was ready for other people to see, sort of tail end of last year, and that was probably close to 3 years that I worked on that. So between sort of, I mean, yeah, I'm in my early 30s now. Between sort of leaving university at like 23 and now, it's been a good decade of reading lots, just reading books, just that I love, trying to sort of learn the sort of genres I love, how they tick, what makes a successful, why do these books sell well, reading stories, reading books about the craft of storytelling, how it's done, and then just writing essay lots to say. And in the last few years, say I've taken it a lot more seriously. And then obviously, say with the short stories that I've been writing recently, I'm putting effort in to try and make it as them as successful as possible. It's not always it's not always successful, but I do my best to sort of take it seriously. I feel like I try and draw a line, because a story like this, it's a comedy, it is silly. I try and draw a line between I don't take myself too seriously. My author bio on if I submit anything is always a quick line about me and a joke. I don't want to sort of spend too time on myself, but the story itself, that's where I put the effort in, and I do take it seriously, even if it's a comedy story. If it's something silly, I'm still going to try and get it right and make the jokes work. I'll happily spend 10 minutes just on the sentence structure and go, right, is that the exact way I need to get it to get the laugh as big as I can? Because even if it's a comedy story, I want the person that's reading it to enjoy it. I want it to come over well. So yeah, even though I don't take myself too seriously, I don't think, especially as a writer, but it's a hobby for me, and I just I've been doing it for years, even though I spend a lot of time like learning about it, but it is still I know that I'm not going to be suddenly a published author for novels or anything anytime soon. But you just keep writing and keep working at it, and yeah.
Do you have a particular routine that you use to kind of balance your daily responsibilities, work, family, all of that with writing?
There's nothing like strict. Like I've tried doing strict routines before, and they never work because life always gets in the way for me. I just basically write in the evenings, and it's usually 3 or 4 days a week. I can't. A lot of people say write every day. There's just no chance I can write every day. It never happens. But once my daughter's in bed and it's like right, okay, that's basically responsibilities over for the day. No one's going to bother me. I've got 2-3 hours before bed. I'm going to jump on the laptop and write something. So yeah, it tends to be that I write at the same time every day. Every now and then I'll get a weekend or a day off where I don't have parent responsibilities, or I've suddenly got time off or something. It's like, okay, I will write in the day. Then it's just basically what free time I have, and just fitting it around it. Obviously, I take my writing seriously, but at the same time, real life stuff, it takes precedence. It has to. I'm a dad, I'm a husband. I have to look after those things first. So it can be frustrating sometimes. I'll have a week where I basically got nothing done because I would have liked to have done this or that, but I just couldn't get to it. But it's definitely a thing where it's not normally a motivational thing for me. It's more just a time. When can I fit it in? I know some people will be like, they'll get up really early in the morning and write. Then I just can't do that. It just end up working out for me. So I just know I find the time that I have, and if I don't end up writing that much, it's not the end of the world. It's not like I'm usually writing to deadlines. It's more just a case of I'll write a short story or a book just for my my own amusement, or for for submission later on. But there's never urgent things to meet. So yeah, I'm lucky in that respect that I just sort of write when I want to.
Oh, that's great. I'm also curious, do you have any authors that you consider strong influences on your work, or who you look to, whose careers or work that you look to as sources of inspiration?
There's definitely authors that I just admire how well they wrote, and sort of how efficient they were in their storytelling, and whether it's style, whether it's content. I say I'm writing a detective novel now, and when I was growing up, sort of teenage, early 20s, the books I was hooked on were Raymond Chandler. It's always older stuff for me. So it's Raymond Chandler, it was Ian Fleming. I love the Bond books. It's Agatha Christie. It's like other Marjorie Allingham, and sort of classic sort of golden age crime writers. I read a lot of that stuff, and then it was same like golden age sci-fi. I read a lot of Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke. Definitely sort of there was a lot of just sort of the stories there that I read a lot when I was a kid, but then I sort of dropped off completely when I was a teenager. I didn't really read a lot, and then I got to sort of 17, 18 again, and then found a couple of those authors where it's just like, oh wow, these are like proper adult stories, and they do what I used to get from books as a kid, but those stopped sort of working for me when I was a teenager. But these really work for me. So yeah, I just definitely sort of fell in love. So especially Raymond Chandler. Like I've been writing a detective story, and it's just that sort of that style that he manages to do. It's I don't know how to describe it other than cool. It's similar to Elmore Leonard is another one as well. It's just that sort of sense of coolness that you get with these types of stories. They're so stylish, and I think it's the thing that I said that I write a lot of stories that tend to be a bit more sort of sci-fi, or I call it sort of like I'm trying to think how to describe it. Really, it's sort of that sort of elevated reality. It's not when you read a Raymond Chandler novel, it doesn't feel real, but that's fine. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's like a noir, or it's in a sci-fi story, you've got that sense of heightened reality to it, and it's not real, but there's something about that style of writing that really speaks to me. So there's definitely novels like that where I really love it when they can get that sort of style across. I find that there tends to be that there's more, the crime novels that are more realistic. They say, oh, it feels realistic, and then it takes a dark turn. That doesn't tend to work for me as well. I prefer a story where it just transports me somewhere, and it's just it's here now. Either it's a comedy story and it's absurd, so you're not taking it seriously, or whether it's a crime story but it's set in sort of 1940s LA or something, and it's that very specific sort of theme to it. It's definitely sort of what I'd expect to. In terms of authors, like recently, I definitely don't read as much. There's a few big sellers that I'll read, like Lee Child, like the Jack Reacher novels are great, and there's Anthony Horowitz is another author that I've loved for years. He still writes. He's written a few like these sort of updated Bond books and a few other things like sort of murder mysteries that are great. Janice Hallett is another person who just suddenly like I've read a couple of her books, and she's a recent author that I remember watching on I think it was on the Pro Writing Aid Crime Week. They had a conversation with her on there, and I love listening to her talk about her career and stuff. And it was sort of fascinating to watch someone who I just I've read a couple of books and said, wow, these are just genius. They're so clever. But listening to her talk and just being, oh, okay, yeah, she's just a regular person who's just loves mysteries and just writes them. And so that was definitely. I think inspirational, definitely, because it just you want to just be one of those people that I say she said that she was working for years and years and years and writing before she got representation, before she moved on. I think that was the thing that I sort of got round to thinking in my late 20s. I was like, okay, the first book didn't work, but that's fine. I enjoy doing this, and I don't need a reward for this. When I wrote my first book, I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, oh, I'll take the world by storm. I'll be this big famous author. And it's like, yeah, of course that's not going to happen, but that's fine. You don't need that.
You have to write 2,000 words a day for that.
yeah, definitely. So no, I'm never going to reach those heights, but that's fine, because you don't need that. If you're enjoying your writing, and then you've got the rest of your life is you're enjoying that too. That's all I care about. So I enjoy what I'm doing, and it's just like I the more I write, the better I get. The more I read, the better I get. Life goes on. I keep writing, and I think you've talked about this before, Craig, where it's just like you don't want to focus on one novel or one project too long. You want to write and write and write, because the more you write, the better you get. And obviously, if you get stuck on one project, you're going to be stuck there for a while. Whereas, so I spent probably too long on the book that I've just been working on, but it was just because obviously the time that I had to write it. But I definitely just think keep writing and keep writing.
It's definitely okay to spend a long time if, as you said, like you're doing it because you enjoy it. And, if you don't need a report for it, and you're writing something that really matters to you, and you're happy taking a long time on it because the process is what's giving you enjoyment, absolutely, that's perfectly fine. It's more, when I talk about that, it's more that if you're looking to get published and kind of have that hope that maybe one day you'll take the world by storm, it's really important to get that practice in. But also, as a writer who's going to be submitting places and getting rejections, because that's just going to happen, having those multiple projects is going to remove each project from like your sense of self-worth. So if one of them, if half of them fail, or nine out of 10 of them fail, you're not saying I'm a failure because you have enough projects that none of them are you. That's right. Like it's not. So you're not, your self-identity isn't wrapped up in any one thing. So you have a bit of a buffer when you get those rejections, and you're gaining experience at the same time. So hopefully you'll get less and less rejections as the time goes on.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the mindset I've sort of locked in now, is that, I'm not, the external factors don't decide my own success. If I've written a book and I'm happy with it, that's success to me, because I've done something. This book that I've just finished, I'm going to be submitting it to agents soon, because it would be brilliant if I could get it published, if people could read it. But if nothing happens with it, it's fine, because I've already started outlining the next book. I've got, short stories that I'm working on and published it. So, it is just like the thing of, I wrote the book that I wanted to write. It was very much a labor of love. I had this idea. I thought it was good. I really wanted to write it. It's a sort of book that I like to read. I wrote it. That's great. If nothing ever happens with it, it's absolutely fine. I'm already working on the next book. So if I get a wave of rejection, it's like, well, it's fine, because I just sold a short story for a bit to one contest, and I'm moving on to the next book already. I'm already working on the next project. So I think that's it. You just keep moving. You just keep writing. You don't tie yourself to one project in terms of, oh, this book needs to succeed, I need to sell this, otherwise it's I'm a failure. Like you said, you're not a failure. You just need to move on and keep writing. So yeah, I've just taken a very sort of laid back approach to it. Success is, and yeah, obviously I took a laid back approach, and then suddenly this happened. So it's clearly working in terms of, this story was one that I just wrote because I had the idea and thought, that sounds fun to write. I'm going to write it. I didn't for a second think it would be published. I didn't, when I've submitted comedy stuff before, it's never done well. It always falls on deaf ears. I thought, almost why bother? Then, well, why bother? Because I want to, because I think it will be fun. And I did. I really loved writing it. It was enjoyable.
Honestly,
I think
when I read it, I was wondering if you were a copywriter who had just decided,
me too.
Hey, I'll just use my copywriting to write fiction. Like, there we go. And it was interesting to hear you talk about how you actually had to do research to make sure you got it right. I mean, Haley and I, as people who write articles, we're kind of like, this is exactly this seems like somebody who is experienced in this style is just doing it in a fictional way, rather than, you do this all day kind of thing. Yeah. So I think you did your research well, and you bang on. So yeah, it was definitely great. I just want to check in with Haley, because I know we are coming up to our hour, and I know that you are very busy. So is there, a final question or anything that you wanted to ask Chris before you have to take off?
No, I was just going to say, my final question was just where... No. I'm actually also in the UK, so it's late here. So I should probably get to bed pretty soon. But I was just going to ask Chris, is there anywhere else we can keep an eye out for your upcoming work, or anything else we should look at, ways people can follow you or keep up with your career? If there's none, that's also fine.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, not massively. I mean, I use social media, but I'm not like super online like a lot of people are, and I'm not a big poster. I do have a Twitter account that's just, I think it's just a CJ Spear. So yeah, I haven't used it in a while. It's one of those things where if I have very few followers, and it's sort of that thing of I could spend time on social media, and you see that a lot with like book marketing and stuff. Oh, you need a social media presence, but every time I spend on social media, I feel like, why am I doing this? Why aren't I doing something more productive? So I always get sucked back from it and end up. So yeah, no, I haven't got a big online presence. I've got a few accounts here and there, but yeah, I wish I could probably, sort of push people to say, oh, I'm here or that, or, you can definitely follow me. But yeah, no, I haven't got much at the moment.
Maybe that will start happening if you continue writing and continue seeing your work get published. I mean, you'll end up having a website to push people to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I can definitely imagine, obviously, at the moment I've been, the amount of short stories that I'm writing, I just keep them in reserve and think, oh, can I do something with that later on? But they'll probably reach a point where I just go, oh, I could publish these online. I could have a website, I could have and I could tweet about it, or, post it on Facebook or whatever. I could definitely have more of a presence, and sort of in the future. I'm sure something will pop up in the end, but I've played around with blogs when I was like younger, but I always, again, found that I was just writing stuff that no one was really reading, because you've got to really put effort in to get your stuff seen. And I'm not a marketing guy at all. I'm not trying to sort of
be more distribution than content than the writing content for.
Yeah, that's it. Because like
it's a lot of non-writing work.
Yeah, and it's like with my first book, like obviously I got rejected from agents. It's like, oh, you could self-publish, and it's like I looked into self-publishing. It's like, you're not writing anymore. You're distributing, you're marketing. That's what you're doing, and it's just not me. I'm just not the sort of thing that's for me. But yeah, it definitely. I say I can imagine stuff changing in the future, but for now, I'm quiet on the online front, I'm afraid.
Well, for anybody watching this, once the video goes up, and if Chris does end up having a website or socials that he wants to promote, you'll just find it under the video, I'm sure, or somewhere easily accessible. Haley, before we wrap up here, you're the head of education for Pro Writing Aid, but is there anything that you are working on that you want to tell the viewers about, whether that's for Pro Writing Aid or any of your own personal projects or anything like that? So anything you want to let people know about before you go?
No, I do have some personal projects in the work, but nothing I can share at this time. That being said, I would love for everybody to check out Pro Writing Aid if you haven't. Chris alluded to this, but we give a lot of free seminars with authors that are just open to everybody that you can come to. I was actually just at one on book marketing literally 50 minutes ago. So, Chris, if you'd like to learn some more about setting up an author website, that is available for free.
I've got it bookmarked. Like it'll be something I'm going to, yeah, probably tomorrow night. So yeah, I'm very aware.
Yeah.
What you guys didn't tell me is you were both there together and you just came to this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, please check that out. We truly try to give as many sessions as we can. We sponsored the Shadows and Knives contest as part of Crime Week. Our next one up will be Sci-Fi Week, actually coming up in September. So please, yeah, keep an eye out for what Pro Writing Aid is doing. And yeah, thank you so much to Craig and Elegant Literature. We're just so happy to support.
It was a fantastic time. Thank you for collaborating with me and being part of that and inviting me to speak at your Crime Writers Week. That was a lot of fun. So I guess that is all of our time for today. Haley, thank you so much once again for being our judge. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. Chris, congratulations. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, no, thank you again. Yeah, thank you for picking my story. It's it still hasn't quite sunk in yet.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much. And I guess, Haley, we will say goodbye. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations. I'm sure we'll be linking people to your work and they'll be seeing more of you. I hope I'll be seeing more of you in the future. I'd like to read more of your work for sure.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Haley.